It is Friday, and we are working for Crusoe. Friday, February 14th, 2025. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. In Los Angeles, he is Sam Park. In Reno, Nevada, I am John Ramey. And it's cold and white and snowy where I am. And although it looks warm and orange where you are, Sam, it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's
raining.
up with my lighting today.
It's exciting. It's like you're coming to us from a sauna or something. It's warming my spirit.
If only.
Yeah, we are actually recording this on Thursday because we have very busy Valentine's Days tomorrow. So today we're going to talk about tariffs and inflation. We are going to talk about King Abdullah of Jordan visiting Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, or as we like to refer to him here in shorthand, Pegseth, speaking to and about NATO, and also Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have had a phone call. Let us start with tariffs and inflation. Sam Park. Okay. Dateline, Washington. The AP reports. As a candidate last year, Donald Trump suggested he could easily conquer inflation and ease voters' fears about the economy. I will very quickly deflate, he promised at a California rally. Wednesday's Consumer Price Index report showed that inflation is punching back, and President Trump could end up facing the same challenges that dragged down his predecessor, President Joe Biden. The annual inflation rate has risen in the 3 months since the November election to 3%, with gasoline prices climbing despite Trump's claims that his return to the White House would signal increased oil production that would lower energy costs.
Okay.
I'm just gonna let that sit, because what's the saying? Facts don't care about your feelings.
If you say so. I mean, honestly, let's just keep something in mind. Trump has been president for 3.5 weeks. Okay. So, in fact, before he was sworn in, he said that, bringing down inflation might be more difficult than he had led on during the campaign. And as we said at the time, every presidential candidate says that they're going to do things that they don't end up doing. And that it shouldn't be any different for Trump than it is for anybody else. Also, I have to find a little bit of fault there with the Associated Press, right, who said that Trump was going to be facing the same challenges as the Biden administration. Right?
Could end up facing.
Okay, fine. The Biden administration faced inflation at a rate of about 9% at one point. All right. I actually don't think Trump can face a rate of inflation that high. All right. I think the Associated Press is wrong when they say that. And now, I don't like Donald Trump. I would prefer that his presidency fail on some level. Right. But that's not, I mean, the idea that inflation is going to come back up to where it was during the Biden administration, that's probably not going to happen. However, inflation did rise yesterday, as the AP points out. We got producer price inflation data today, which was up to about 0.4%. That is for the month. Now, that was a little higher than the expectation by analysts, but if you look at core producer price inflation, that was right on the button. So although markets fell yesterday on the consumer price inflation news, they rebounded somewhat today because producer price inflation was, still there and maybe a little bit higher than people might want, but it was still relatively moderate. Having said that, Trump released a social media post yesterday, which we can share with our viewers now. And he said that he wanted interest rates to fall in line with the tariffs. Now, of course, he's actually raising the tariffs, so he doesn't want interest rates to go up, right? But what he meant, apparently, is that as the tariffs were instituted, he wanted interest rates to be cut by the Federal Reserve. Right now, cutting interest rates, just, as a little economics 101 here, cutting interest rates is generally, broadly, that is, a increase in the supply of money in the economy, and tariffs are a restriction on the supply of goods in the economy, right? So, John, if you increase the supply of money plus
I know.
decrease the supply of goods, what does that equal?
Inflation. You have
Exactly.
too many dollars chasing too few goods.
Exactly. Right. And so basically, when Trump puts that post out on social media, he is saying, I want inflation. In about as clear language as you could possibly imagine. Now, of course, he doesn't see it that way, but that I don't, facts don't care about his feelings. And so it's just alarming to see this, where he says he understands that inflation is a problem, but seems to want to advocate policies that will exacerbate inflation. Now, I should point out right now that, as we've mentioned many times, tariffs are inflationary, uh, but they're not by themselves likely to touch off runaway inflation or an inflationary spiral, as we might put it in economic
For example,
parlance.
the last inflationary spiral was a global phenomenon,
Yes, that's right. And
compounded by the supply chain being affected around the world by the pandemic,
exactly.
plus other government stimulus expenditures.
Sure. I mean, there are a bunch of different factors. Tariffs,
That's
again,
not the case with tariffs.
no, I mean, it's basically a one-time price increase for certain goods, right? Or perhaps
Coming into one market.
yeah, quite a large number of goods, perhaps, but uh, the adjustment is can be dramatic, but it's not sustained, right? The prices go up and then they stay there, right? And so it's not this runaway phenomenon of inflation that could be very damaging to the economy. Now, it's not good for it, but it's not this horrible, like, shelling of the economy that goes on for months at a time.
Okay.
And
Sorry,
so
go ahead.
that it's important to keep that in mind, I think.
So today, Thursday, the AP reports President Donald Trump has said he is announcing increases on U.S. tariffs to match the tax rate that other countries charge on imports.
Yes, that news conference is happening right now, actually, as we're recording this, unfortunately.
All caps, today is the big one, colon, reciprocal tariffs, three exclamation points. Trump posted on his social media site. Make America Great Again. Trump later posted that there would be a news conference, the one that you just referenced, Sam, in the Oval Office on tariffs Thursday afternoon. That's afternoon East Coast time.
Yeah, 1 p.m. That is
Yeah,
literally right now.
right now. Raising questions about whether he's formally signing the tariffs he previously said he would do or simply making the broader case for them to U.S. voters. Whatever. We'll sort that out next week.
Yeah,
But
tune in next week, folks.
reciprocal tariffs versus tariffs generally, do we care?
I mean, again, it depends on what they are and how they're implemented. One thing I would say, though, is that, uh, again, this is not efficient. All right. I mean, you have to sort of keep track of every single thing that's being imported, and
Levy a tax.
what's the reciprocity? For instance, John, you and I have numerous times enjoyed some fine French cognac, right?
We
Now,
have.
cognac is a variety of brandy, right? Obviously, we don't make cognac here because that's the name of the French place where it is made. But we make brandy here in the United States. So are we going to start levying tariffs on French brandy, French cognac, because they levy tariffs on our brandy if they do, right? So, well, you got to find out what are the tariffs that are charged by other countries, and what are the corresponding products for which reciprocal tariffs will be charged by us. This is a big research project, right? And again, you have to hire people, that you have to pay people to do this work, right? Which doesn't, paying people in the government to do work is something that Donald Trump doesn't actually seem to want to do right now. So, how is this actually going to get done? Now, I'm not saying it's not going to. I'm saying it's going to be kind of a mess, which is why you don't want a lot of tariffs to begin with. It's just because it's a lot for the government to have to keep
Yeah.
track of.
It's a lot
right?
of moving parts.
Absolutely, right? And then, you might get retaliatory tariffs and on and on and on and on. I mean, it's much simpler to not have to do these things. And, people say that they want smaller government. Well, do you or do you not, right? In fact, Trump has said that he wants to institute an external revenue service, right? The ERS, right? To administer his wide-ranging tariff plans. That's expanding the government. All right, I'm sorry. Right, if you want to create a new government agency, that's expanding the government. And by the way, as we've mentioned many times, it's not actually external revenue; it's paid by the American importers. And so, again, I don't want to belabor these points. We'll see what happens with this announcement today.
Okay. Just when you mentioned cognac as an example, I immediately realized in our history we've had the Boston Tea Party, we've had a whiskey rebellion, so maybe now we can have like a cognac riot
Yeah,
or
don't
something.
don't forget freedom fries.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
yes, fair enough. But did anybody actually get upset or stop
No, I don't.
buying French fries?
I
No.
think it was ridiculous.
How
So
could I forget freedom fries?
they were the sort of Gulf of America of their time, right?
That- you know what, Sam? At no extra cost to payroll on working for Crusoe, I will now diligently track prices in the various markets in which I'm working on cognac.
Okay,
Research purposes only.
of course.
CNN reports that America's central bank is in no rush to slash interest rates anytime soon because Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell does understand economic policy. Sorry, that's not a quote. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told lawmakers Tuesday. Powell also faced a barrage of questions about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, tariffs, and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Powell spoke to Congress.
Yeah, he does that, a few times a year. It's just a routine part of his job. That's that.
So
He
even
didn't.
though he's not elected, he does face questions from elected officials.
Sure, he's appointed by the president, and many people who are appointed by the president often go before Congress to
Sure.
face, questions from lawmakers. And obviously, Powell's job is very important, and he, should be responsive in that manner.
Most of the Democrats in the committee called out Musk and his associates for trying to access sensitive government systems. They talked about the CFPB. I mean, that's not really Powell's lane, I guess.
No, I mean the CFPB is related to what he does, but he as he said many times yesterday and
Yeah.
throughout his career, it's not really up to him to say how these things should go, right? And that's just the part of his job, really.
I mean, the CFPB basically makes sure that banks can't charge you insane overdraft fees or kind of punitive interest
Yeah,
rates and stuff.
that's right.
Powell, oh, this is CNN. Powell also had some exchanges with lawmakers over tariffs and China's trade practices, though he didn't wade too deep into that discourse as expected. Again, that's CNN's reporting. Any other thoughts on Powell talking
No, I
to
mean
Congress?
he'll do what he needs to do as time goes on, and he's got about a year and a half left in his term, and I think he'll just try and keep his head down and just keep on doing the job.
And then we'll bump into him at a Dead & Co. show someday. Anyway,
If you go to one, I'm not, I won't be there.
I might go just to see him. Okay, let's move on to perhaps a more hilarious thought. Dateline Washington, and just the timing of this is insane. The Associated Press reporting, President Donald Trump hosted Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House Tuesday and renewed his insistence that Gaza could somehow be emptied of all residents, controlled by the United States, and redeveloped as a tourist area. He really did say this to the King of Jordan.
Yes.
The Associated Press goes on to report it's an audacious but highly unlikely scheme to dramatically remake the Middle East and would require Jordan and other Arab nations to accept more Gazans, something Abdullah reiterated after their meeting that he opposes. Abdullah was asked repeatedly about Trump's plan to clear out Gaza and overhaul it as a resort on the Mediterranean Sea. He didn't make substantive comments on it and didn't commit to the idea that his country could accept large numbers of Gazans. Oh, to be a fly on the wall in that room where that conversation took
I mean,
place.
the thing is, this meeting was scheduled
Yeah.
before last week when Trump unveiled his Gaza plan, right? And so, unlike, for instance, President Sisi of Egypt, uh, the king actually chose to honor the meeting and attend, right? President Sisi was also scheduled to be in Washington this week and
And said
decided not
thanks,
to
but no
go.
thanks.
Yeah,
Wow.
because
Okay.
of the Gaza plan. He said, I won't go if that's going to be on the agenda. And so he didn't go. Now, Egypt is, of course, a much larger and more powerful country, although it's not doing especially well right now, right? But Jordan is much smaller, right? And really much more dependent. And so the king had to go and sort of, say the most kind of non-committal diplomatic things he could possibly imagine, and then make it clear to Trump in private that he wasn't down with this plan. Uh, but Trump really seems to be serious about this. And I cannot overstate how disturbing that is to me, especially in line with some of the other things that he's doing with reference to Ukraine, for example, which we'll get to in our next segment. Uh, uh, and if he's going to keep pushing this, then uh, it could be an utter calamity. For instance, he also said that he's just tired of the ceasefire deal in Gaza that he and his team helped negotiate to begin with. Right? He's like, I don't like, uh, releasing two or three hostages this week and then two or three more next week, and on and on and on. And one might well ask, well, then why did you agree to it to begin with? And some people suspect that, for instance, we know that the ceasefire deal has three phases. Uh, and I think people believe on some level that he only really cared about phase one, or even just, saying that there was a deal for phase one before he took office. And then once now he doesn't really care about phases two or three, or even the full execution of phase one, apparently, which he seems to want to pull out of. But it's possible that he's just using this to uh, uh, pressure Hamas into making sure that they honor their end of the deal, which it seemed earlier this week that they might be objecting to this or that, and weren't going to release the hostages that were scheduled to be released this coming weekend. Today, they say they are going to. And what they were objecting to was that not enough aid was getting into Gaza as was mandated by the deal. And it seems as though some of that is getting in a little bit easier as of today. So as far as we know, the ceasefire deal is going to hold up, but it's too early to tell. We'll find out over the weekend.
Okay. Shall we move on to Secretary of Defense Hegseth?
I'm afraid we have to, yes.
Dateline Brussels. CNN reports U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, again in the working for Crusoe style book, that is Pegseth, said on Wednesday that the war between Ukraine and Russia, quote, must end, that Kyiv joining NATO is unrealistic, and that the U.S. will no longer prioritize European and Ukrainian security as the Trump administration shifts its attention to securing the United States' own borders and deterring war with China. In remarks before a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, Hegseth also said that European troops should be the primary force securing a post-war Ukraine, something U.S. troops will not be involved in, he added. Okay. Major abdication of United States leadership in Europe, preserving the peace since the end of the Second World War. We can start with that, I guess.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much more there is to say, frankly. And I mean, it wasn't difficult at all to find people yesterday who were saying this is a surrender, right? You've given up uh, two things that Ukraine really wanted to get out of any possible deal, right? Which were a return to their historical borders and NATO membership, right? And apparently the United States won't back Ukraine in either of these uh, aspects. And those, in fact, reciprocally are two things that Vladimir Putin really did want, right? He wants to keep all the territory he's gotten, and he wants Ukraine to never be in NATO. And so Trump has given him these things up front in any negotiation. Now, earlier today, uh, Hegseth gave a press conference I believe in Brussels, and sort of reiterated this all these same ideas, right? He used the word reality many times, reality and realistic and things such like this, right? And he just seemed uh, uh, to not allow for any possibility of anything different happening, right? In other words, this is just reality, right? Russia will keep this land, and Ukraine won't join NATO. Again, he said that joining NATO was unrealistic, right? Now, it's not like, pigs flying or something like this. These
Right.
are countries join alliances and things like this all the time, right? And so this, it seemed to me anyway, just a bit disingenuous and uh, honestly sort of weak, right? Now, Hegseth, he's a tough guy, la la la. He was in the military, and Donald Trump, super tough guy, and stuff like this. Where it's, oh well, but apparently we just can't do anything about things, right? Reality says that we can't, right? And uh, Now, honestly, Hegseth made his career on TV, right? And he's good at that. And so the posture he was adopting, right? Things that made the things he was saying seem compelling. Uh, but if you really boil it down, it's a position of weakness. And I think this is an underexamined aspect of Donald Trump's entire political career, right? It's actually uh, an ongoing process of surrender, right? And to the worst elements of our own nation and others. Just a sort of cowardice, right? Which is that we don't want to be involved in the world because the world is too big and scary. We just want to withdraw to our own borders. In fact, Hegseth said that the United States is, our military is very busy right now because we're securing our own borders. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is not an invasion, right? I know you want to say it is, but
It's like these people have never been to San Diego
yeah, or understand what a war actually is.
or an
In fact,
invasion. Right.
right?
Right.
And Again, this is all very unnerving to me because it feels like, especially this constant reference to reality, right? And wanting to create an alternate reality that's really not at all the way things are. That's in fact at odds with the actual reality in which we all live. All this stuff about Gaza.
Or the Gulf of America, Sam. I mean,
Yes,
you
exactly.
pick anything as unserious as you want. There is kind of this is reality as we dictate it.
Yes, and I don't. You know, I know I've sort of gone out on a limb here, right? I've extended this kind of analysis, perhaps uh, more than I ought to have, but I don't think that's misplaced, right? It just, you have to follow the logic of what these people actually say, right? For instance, none of this should be surprising, right? Trump has talked about things like this for years, right? He's talked about Europeans need to do more, blah, blah, blah. By the way, it's one of the reporters I think it was from Agence France Presse at the press conference today, asked Hegseth, uh, do you think that the United States will one day contribute 5% of its GDP to its own defense, which it doesn't, right? The United
Sure.
States has been saying all week long and before, right, that European nations should now be contributing 5% of their gross domestic product to defense, but we don't, right? We're at 3.4. And Hegseth, I have to say, he's pretty nimble, right? He, came up with an answer off the top of his head that didn't actually mean anything, but was entirely coherent and, it seemed to have some logic to it. And so, but again, no one's actually saying that the United States is going to live up to these obligations that it wants other nations to pursue. It's just again, it's very unnerving to me.
President Trump spoke to Vladimir Putin on the telephone. CNN reporting President Donald Trump said negotiations to end the Ukraine war will start, quote, immediately after holding a, quote, lengthy and highly productive telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday morning, yesterday. The call, which is the first known conversation between the presidents since Trump assumed office last month, came as Trump makes clear to his advisors he wants to bring the Ukraine conflict to a swift end. Trump administration officials said they hoped a prisoner exchange on Tuesday could portend renewed efforts to end the war, which is about to enter its fourth year, February 23rd. The Kremlin said Trump and Putin spoke for nearly 90 minutes. That would be a rough 90 minutes.
Well, keep in mind, as we've mentioned before,
translations. Let's say it's 50%.
Right,
let's say it's 45 minutes. That's still a rough 45.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's the, what, John? We do that every week. Hey, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Now, I think it's important to keep the chronology in mind here, right? Mark Fogel, the American prisoner, was released in the middle of the night, apparently, on Tuesday, and that is touchdown in Washington.
Was he serving time in Russia for weed?
Yes. He had medical prescribed marijuana. Now, I've worked in that trade a long time ago, and we always used to advise our patients, don't take your medical marijuana on the plane. And so that still holds, even though it's legal in many states now, including California. What about Nevada? It's legal.
Oh, very legal in Nevada.
Okay, fine. So, yeah. But again, that doesn't mean you can take it on the plane, even domestically, much less to Russia. And so now we're glad that Mr. Fogel has been released. And then Hegseth, because it's earlier in Europe than it is here, right? Mm-hmm. Or that is later. He made his remarks in Brussels yesterday that we've just talked about. And after that, after Hegseth said that Ukraine wouldn't be in NATO and that they wouldn't be, that Russia wouldn't have to give any territory back, seemingly after he said those things, Trump had his call with Putin. Now, that might just be a coincidence, but I think Vladimir Putin would prefer us to think that it's not a coincidence, right? And that he wants to make it look like he heard what Hegseth said and then picked up the phone, right? Now, we don't know if that actually happened or not. Maybe they had this call scheduled anyway, right? But it does seem as though all these happening in sequence, it beggars belief to me that they could all be coincidental. And so after Trump got off the phone, he put up another social media post, which we can put up here, in which he said that a bunch of different people are going to be, coordinating the negotiations, which could start very quickly. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was that the people he identified as taking part in these negotiations as they get started did not include General Keith Kellogg, who had been Trump's special envoy for Ukraine. And now General Kellogg, as far as we know, is going to be attending the Munich Security Conference this weekend. But Trump did not say that he was going to be taking part in these negotiations. And Kellogg seemed to be sort of even-handed in his approach. He issued a report last year in which he outlined what people thought might be Trump's policy on Ukraine going forward. That was, again, sort of trying to, balance the issues of both Russia and Ukraine. Apparently, that's not happening anymore, right? Or at least Kellogg's not going to be intimately involved in the negotiations, according to President Trump's social media post, which, may not actually be indicative of what's going to come to pass.
What about the chatter about rare earth minerals in the eastern part of Ukraine as part of as a component for some peace deal? That seemed nonsensical because that's in the part that Russia controls right now, right?
Well, I'm not exactly sure where the rare earths are, but both Trump and Zelensky have talked about this.
And
And
Zelensky basically said, fine,
oh,
right?
absolutely, yeah. And
Take
in
the
fact,
mining interests, whatever.
in Hegseth's press conference today, he talked about that, and he said that this is, instead of playing the same checkers game that we've been playing for years, Donald Trump is playing chess, right? Because he's also, pursuing these business deals with Ukraine, and the Secretary of Defense said that business relationships are more tangible than values, right? And
I mean,
so,
look, if pure naked transactionalism actually makes the United States
yes.
foreign policy defend Ukraine, fine.
Absolutely, right?
I'm cool with
Now,
it.
I'm not certain that it will, right?
Right.
But if it does help, then I'm for that.
It
I
might actually be a more, to borrow a phrase from Pegseth, realistic path to supporting Ukraine getting a better deal.
yes.
Because
Now,
Vladimir Putin's not going to trade rare earth minerals with us.
no, he's not. Well, I mean, I guess he might, uh, but the way this all played out, uh, you can understand why people think it's just a surrender, right? For instance, Trump issued these social media posts about his call with Putin, and then he said, and now I'm going to call President Zelensky and talk to him about it, right? And so he told the world about it before he told Zelensky personally. And then later yesterday, he had a press conference in the White House, or maybe not a press conference, that there were reporters in the Oval Office. And one of them asked him, do you think Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine are an equal partner in this negotiation? And Trump paused and seemed to think about it for a second. He said, that's an interesting question. Then he paused again and said, I think they need to make peace. So he did not say that he thought
Right.
that Ukraine was an equal partner. And I don't think he believes they are, right? I think that, and it really seems as though he sees this as a deal that he is making with Vladimir Putin, right, about Ukraine, right, who has said for 3 years nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Apparently, that's not a going concern anymore either. Uh, and so people feel like Trump is just cutting Ukraine loose. And I think they have every justification for feeling that way. Maybe it won't turn out that way, but I think it's very possible that it will. And uh, I hope that doesn't happen.
Next week, what are we looking at?
Well, as we've mentioned, the Munich Security Conference is getting started right now. So we'll see what happens there. Also, right now, as we mentioned, the reciprocal tariffs are being outlined, apparently. We don't know exactly. Honestly, I expect that's going to be a mess. So we'll have to try and figure out how much of the mess we really want to sort through. Uh, and also today, uh, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, fresh from his trip to Paris, is landing in Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump. He could have great issue with those reciprocal tariffs, by the way.
Sure.
His country has also accepted at least one, and I think several, migrant deportation flights. And so we'll see if that ends up being talked about in their meeting. But India, very important country, and has sort of ongoing developing relationships with the United States. Modi has always had a pretty good relationship with Trump. I think he expects that to continue, but there are issues between the two countries that will need to be sorted out. And so we'll definitely want to be talking about that next week also, on top of what other crazy thing might happen between now and then, which hopefully won't be too many things.
I have to say, Sam, I've enjoyed you in sepia tone this episode.
Thank you.
It's giving us a Ken Burnsian veneer of respectability, or at least for me.
I'm just not sure why it happened, honestly. I mean, I haven't done anything different with my lighting today than I normally do. Okay.
It's groovy.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for us. Have a great Valentine's Day. Have a great weekend. He's Sam. I'm John. Peace.
Thank you, everybody.